I'm Carey Stinson, and my journey through life has been quite an adventure. For over 20 years, I played Barney the Dinosaur on tour and 7 seasons of the hugely popular TV show Barney and Friends. Now my journey is to bring together friends and guests from all over the entertainment world for inspiring and at times amusing behind-the-scenes conversation. I'm Carey Stinson, and this is Purple Roads. Welcome to Purple Roads. My name is Carey Stinson, and as always, I'm thrilled you're here. You know, doing this show has been so much fun, and all the adventures I've gone over the years. I met my good friend Danny Joe's Treehouse, and Danny introduced me to Suzie, who is here today. And I've never done a show like this, and I'm really excited about this. Suzie Hicks is an award-winning filmmaker, author, television host, and we're going to talk a lot about climate, which is such important. And she's done such an amazing job learning how to do this with kids. So I'm really excited about this. So we've got Suzie Hicks, the Climate Chick. Suzie, how are you?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I am so glad to have you here.
What would you like to know?
Oh my gosh, there's so much I'd like to know, but I know climate. So I've looked a lot, and I know about you're talking about a lot with climate with kids. And you've written a book, and I mean, there was just one thing after the next, which I love. I love
Yes,
very much. So let's just start from the beginning.
absolutely. Totally. I'm so thrilled to be talking to another person who works so hard to create really high quality children's media and also talks about the kind of the magic that happens behind the curtain of how any of this is made, how the kids media sausage gets made. And so I got started probably when I was a kid. Really, I grew up half covered in mud, half glued to the TV screen. And so the things that really affected me as a kid were my experiences in nature, but then also the stories that I saw on TV. And my biggest hero when I was growing up was Steve Irwin, and I was like, this guy is so charismatic, and he has a mission. Like, not he's not just charismatic for the sake of being charismatic. Like, he's connecting with people for the sake of protecting the earth. And I think that's the coolest thing ever. And so I was really affected by media growing up. I was a total PBS kid. And then when I was in college, I was studying entertainment, but I was also deeply, deeply anxious about climate change and about, biodiversity loss. And so I ended up working at the New England Aquarium for a summer because they were looking for either biology majors or drama majors. And I was like, I know nothing about fish, but man, I can raise my eyebrows and smile. So I worked there for a summer, and it totally changed my life. It made me realize that I could be a performer, and I could be in entertainment, and I could be fun and silly and also help connect kids to the natural world and help build those priorities early. So when you're an adult and you have more fiscal power, you have more political power, you're able to have that kind of compass to, steer your morals. Um, so from there, I started creating a little TV show in college about sustainability. And then after I graduated, I saw the Fred Rogers documentary. It came out, Kismet, the universe always has a plan. It came out the week I graduated college. And I was unbelievably lost. I was like, what am I doing with my life? What am I even applying for? Like, what jobs am I even searching for on Indeed? Um, and then this documentary came out, and I sobbed through the whole thing. And after I walked out of the theater, I went, that's what I want to do. I want to make meaningful children's media, specifically for the prompt of environmental education, awareness, and literacy, with the lens of deep social emotional connection, which is very niche. And there's not a lot of job postings for that. So in the last 6 years since I graduated, it's been a lot of shoehorning myself into places so I could advocate, and then also just making it all myself. So everything that I've made and put out into the world has been crowdfunded. I wrote a kid's book about climate or about plastic pollution. We crowdfunded for that in 2020. And then I self-funded a proof of concept for a kid's show about climate change, which led to a really successful festival run, even though I made it with like $100 and my friends in my yard. And then through that, I got put in touch with a producer. We crowdfunded for the first episode and we just shot it 2 weeks ago.
I love all that. There's so much there. There's so much there for me to want to talk about.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, yeah, because the world has changed so much, right?
Mhm.
From when I did it with Barney, but we still did it that way, you know, and so did Fred Rogers. I've talked to many of um, you know, Mr. McFeely. I got to meet him. I
Yeah,
got to work with him,
it's awesome.
and same thing, right? They were created in Pittsburgh. We were in Dallas, and now the options of this, you know, when I even did this show, Purple Roads, we were in a studio, and then
Mhm.
COVID hit, and then all of a sudden everyone learned what Zoom was, right? And we're doing, and I've never looked back. I just kept doing it this way.
Right.
And I think if you have an idea, as you do, you go out there. And the short of me is that I've tried about every aspect of the entertainment world you could.
Yeah.
I mean, from singing, which I was horrible at, but I tried and I got an A
I
in my
love
class,
it.
even though I was not really good at it. I've I've done dancing, I've done tap dancing, photography. I mean, I've tried it all because of what you just said, which was it was just in my soul, and I couldn't,
Mhm.
I knew not to stop that.
Yeah.
And I love that you've taken climate and you've taken theater and found a way to do it and do it in different mediums.
Thank you.
Um, so let's talk about what challenges you've had in doing this. You know, working with kids, there's it's so different than working in regular, you know, with regular books or media. So working with kids and then taking something of climate, and then, as you know, and I've seen this with you, and it's what I love so much, you have to have positivity in there. Right.
Absolutely.
You can't just say the world's falling apart. That's not going to work. And to get that across, do it in a positive way, but also doing it a very meaningful way. So, with all that being said, how have you done this?
Oh God, that's a great question. I appreciate so much your perspectives on this because it is not glamorous. 99.9% of the time, it's not glamorous or lucrative. And so that it both discourages and encourages me at the same time. It discourages me because I'm like, wow, man, it would be so nice to have a 401k. But it also encourages me because I'm like, I am deeply called to do this work, regardless of what it gets me and my ego. It's the vocation that means so much to me, and I have to keep going, even if it's not, fruitful in any
Sure.
way. I have to keep, like, I don't know what that is about being an artist that's like, keep going, even when you're like, ah. Um, and so I just really appreciate that. And the way that I got started was I'm really curious about this topic called ecophobia. Um, and I've been really curious about it since I was in college because American communication about environmental issues and climate change have been very unsuccessful. And part of that is that they are funded by fossil fuels and by the people that are hurting the environment in order to distract us from actually making meaningful change. And so the whole concept of individual action is more or less a distraction. And it's so
Right.
important in individual action. Everything that we do is amazing because it helps us build our sense of identity and it helps us build our sense of responsibility in the world. And also the term carbon footprint was created by BP, to be like, hey, Carey, what are you doing to make the world worse? And then they're like, and we dumped millions of barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. But don't look at that. Don't look at that. Look at you. Did you drive to work this week? How dare you, in a car-centric infrastructure? So I grew up in the era of individual action. And so I, with a kid with anxiety, was like, oh my God, I have to control every aspect of my life. And I have to be like puritanically non-consumptive in order to be alive. And so I would do battery drives at my school and I changed all of our screensavers to something that didn't take as much like light or
Right.
watts or whatever, and climate change still got worse. And I was like, I'm doing everything I possibly can, and it's not working. And so thinking about that of being like, this really has to be a collective effort where we tell the powers that be that it's not enough. That's what's going to work. But that is incredibly daunting.
Sure.
And the term ecophobia comes from seeing a problem that is so big and so insurmountable that you're like, I actually don't want to think about this at all. And I'm going to like shut my brain off to this and look the other way. And that is a really common response to the issue of climate change. Because we're like, hey kids, the world's ending. Good luck.
Right.
Which obviously doesn't work. And so in college, I wrote my senior academic honors thesis, which had to be an 80-page paper about anything I wanted. I wrote my senior honors thesis about environmental communication to kids and ways to avoid ecophobia. And there's one very specific filmmaker that I focused on, Hayao Miyazaki, who did Spirited Away, who did Princess Mononoke, who did Ponyo, Howl's Moving Castle. He's a Japanese filmmaker. And the way that he communicates environmentalism is so different than the way that Americans have communicated environmentalism, because in American television, media, movies, books, it's very like good versus evil. One good guy battles one bad guy to the death and wins at all costs, and everybody cheers, and then they get thrown a bunch of roses. And that's just not how the concept of climate change in society is working right now, because we are working under a system of overconsumption. We are working under a system of greed. We are working under a system of consumerism and what's the word that I'm looking for? Convenience. But we're all just trying to survive. And so rather than being like, how dare you use a paper towel today? Miyazaki's movies are more like, look at these people attempting to live in harmony with nature and struggling. And the quote unquote villains in his stories are business owners who are helping people actively while also harming the environment. And so not only does he create this like beautifully aesthetic love for the magic of nature through these, magical characters and through these incredibly detailed drawings, it also says, look at these people doing their best and how it's in conflict with nature. And I was really touched by that as a kid. And so many people that watch his movies are like, oh, this is it. Miyazaki himself is a very big nihilist around climate. He's like, let the oceans rise. Let them get us all out of here. But his films are much more hopeful. And so for me, as a budding creative, when I was younger, I was looking at his work and saying, this isn't doom and gloom. It's realistic. And it does not attempt to predict the future, because we're really on a choose your own adventure game. And so when kids ask me like, are we going to be okay? I'm like, well, we got to do something about it. And then maybe we will. And they're like, well, are we all doomed? Is this hopeless? Is there no reason to keep going? I say, well, I don't know. We gotta figure out ourselves. We're writing our story as we live it. We're building the plane as we fly it. Right. And we'll see if we get to the destination safely.
Well, it's interesting because I went through both of the things you're talking about on a different subject with Barney, which was love, right? Barney was about entertaining and friendship and love for kids, which seems so simple, right? And it seems like a subject that everyone will be fine with, except that we got death threats. Literally, I got death threats when I was out there. People said they hated us. They hated a purple dinosaur that was really just teaching about love. And
Mhm.
when I started, Susie, I was working birthday parties in the back of a van. There was no TV show, no
That's
one other than people in the Dallas area. And I mean, a small part of the Dallas area knew who this purple dinosaur was. And obviously, you see what happened to that. The whole world ended up finding how that is. So you don't jump into it right for the money. You jump into it because you know it's good. I was 23 years old going to hospitals and seeing the difference that this purple dinosaur was making in kids' lives.
Yep.
And that was the fuel. And 22 years, that was always the fuel of it. And I've always said that I got more out of it than I could ever have given, is what these kids did to me.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, everyone's saying, I wish we had Barney now. And all of a sudden, they're understanding love. I mean, I had to go through at one point I forget what they call it, but it was a class with all the employees, right? So not just the creative side, but also the business side.
Totally.
And this lady said, is it okay to hug someone? And I go, well, I do it for a living. Of course it is. And this other lady was so offended by that anyone would hug her. And now everyone's doing it and talking about love and needing it, right? So this
Yeah.
subject matter that you're talking about and all the things that you're against, I totally understand. But I think it's because it just, as you say, the fear and the scaring without anyone even looking in. They just immediately go, no, 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 no.
Right.
Right. And then they look at it and go, especially watching, I watched your pilot and your sizzle reel, and I was like, well, this is just so upbeat and fun
Yeah.
and doesn't it make you want to know more? But it's
Right.
exactly what you're saying, just the subject alone turns people off.
Absolutely. And it is such an issue of loneliness versus community. Of like, I'm alone, I don't need anybody's help. I can do it all myself. I don't want anyone to support me or be kind to me. And that is not how we're like wired to operate. We are wired to be together and to be burdens to each other and to have to pick someone up from the airport. It's way cheaper, first of all, to have a thriving community because you don't have to pay for everything because you're with each other. But it also makes a lot more change. A lot more change is possible with more people. And also it helps us keep going when we feel burnt out and we feel like we can't keep going. I wish I knew what the actual source of it is, but there's this tweet that I reference a lot in my work where someone says that social movements are like a choir, where when you're singing by yourself, when you have to stop to take a breath, the music completely stops. So if you're singing alone and you stop, there's no more music.
Right.
But when you're with a choir, there's enough voices continuing the melody that you can stop and you can take like 4 or 5 breaths if you wanted,
Right.
and then come back in to the song, and the song never stops. And
Right.
that's really what I resonate with that. But we have to take care of each other and be kind. And I learned that from Barney when I was a kid.
Well, and I think you need I always say at the end of this show, I always say, keep your eyes, your ears, and your heart open.
Mm,
And you need to do that. Right.
yeah.
Listen. Don't be afraid. Listen. Don't make your mind up. Right. Listen. Listen. Because you might be surprised. You go, oh, actually, that's pretty awesome what she's doing. That's pretty awesome what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the book. Let's start with the book. Tell me about the book,
Totally.
the idea for the book, writing the book.
Yeah, it's so funny that this is the topic we're talking about because that's kind of what the book is about. The book is about a little girl named Zaina, and she is Zaina the Great, and she's the queen of nature. And she's based on a student that I had at a preschool when I was teaching nature. Her name was Zaina, and she said, "I'm the queen of nature," and I said, "Absolutely, you are." But in the book, she
And the reason we just love kids so much. For that
exactly,
right there.
period. And in the book, she encounters kind of an anthropomorphized giant great Pacific garbage patch where it's like a gross giant monster made out of garbage is in the ocean. And she's like, well, let's figure out how he got here, why he's so big, and how we can make him smaller because he's tangling all of her friends up and they're eating the plastic and they're having a bad time. But in the book, she's like, I can do this all by myself. I don't need any help. Even though in the book, her friends are like, hey, do you want some support? We can help you. And she's like, no, 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 I'm good. I can do this all by myself. So she goes and she figures out where a lot of the plastic is coming from. And it's coming from inland, which is where most plastic in the ocean comes from too. And it comes from a restaurant that is a fish restaurant, because a lot of plastic in the ocean comes from the fishing industry, and also plastic wrappers and packaging. And so she goes and talks to the business owner, and he's like, whoa, I'm not doing anything illegal. Like, what are you talking about? This is fine. I've never littered. Me personally, I've never littered. But because he's creating a bunch of single-use plastics, the plastic is still ending up in the ocean. So he sends her to talk to the local official, because he's like, if you want to change the law, I'll follow it, but nothing I'm doing is illegal. And the politician basically is like, go away, kid. I have no time for you. Like, go back to school. I have so many other things that I have to deal with right now. I have no time for you. And so she's like, well, no one's listening to me. So maybe I just have to go fight the monster myself. She goes into the ocean and immediately gets tangled in the plastic. And then her friends come and they save her. And they're like, you don't have to do this by yourself. We're all here to help you with different aspects of it. So then one friend goes and works with the business owner. One friend goes and works with the politician. Another friend goes and does a beach cleanup. And then the monster, through all of these different avenues being hit, the monster finally starts to shrink and shrink and shrink. And so in the end, they're able to shrink the monster. And then there's this little moment in the book where it's like, the end, just kidding. We did succeed in doing this, but in real life, there's still the plastic issue. So here are a bunch of different tips that you can use in your home, in your work, in your school, in order to reduce the amount of plastic in your lives. And a lot of that is advocating for companies to stop making so much plastic in the first place. Yeah, so that's the book. And we sold 500 copies, and I'm working on a reorder right now. And it's been
very cool. Very cool. Well, I think you're hitting on, just out of that, two really good things. One, kids, right? That's the way to go, right? Because the kids they're the ones that it makes sense, right? You could talk to them and they go, yeah, of course. Why would? And I love the idea, because I think it was what Barney did, and I think it's in the shows that I see that are successful. It's not preaching, right? It's the tips.
Yeah.
I think that's where people go, well, of course I could do that.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of saying you have to do this. I think that's where you get in issues. But the tips like that, and people go, well, that just makes sense.
Oh,
and it's not affecting my life that much to do this and this and this and make those changes.
Yeah. And in the environmental movement, we so rarely get a win that I feel like it's really important to show victory stories of like, it worked. The thing we wanted to happen happened, and it can happen. We just need to work together.
Well, and I think that I always think about, what we found through COVID, right? All of a sudden, everyone stopped driving.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, it made a difference. And that went away. I thought that should have been highlighted even more and more and more and more. Right? We could have made some differences in a lot of ways. And then I think everyone went back to their car. Everyone went back to working the lives they were working, and all of a sudden everyone's stressed again, and we're driving,
Yeah. We're doing the same thing all over again.
Doing the same thing all over again. Which is easy to do, right? Slip back into it.
Yeah.
So did the book inspire you to then do the show?
So the book was a very specific moment where I was working at this school, and my colleague who was the head of the school also taught a children's book writing class. And so I wrote that book because of my experience at the school, but I ended up making the show because of the show that I had made in college. So I made a show in college called Suzie Hicks, the Science Chick, which was just like a fun, goofy college humor show about sustainability. But it just kind of lit the fire for me. And in the pandemic in 2020, my producer for the show in college was like, let's do it. Let's actually do it. and I had just gotten into grad school to study climate science. So I have an undergrad in entertainment, and I applied like the night before COVID hit. So I didn't know COVID was going to hit, but I applied to grad school and I got in. And then I was moving from California to New York to go to grad school. And I was like, well, I have 6 months left in California. I better make a show because all my friends that are in the film industry are here and they all owe me favors. And so I've got 6 months. Let's see what we can do. And so we created this show where there's a puppet. Her name is Sprout, and she's a sunflower plant, but she's too little to bloom yet. So she hasn't bloomed yet because she's still growing. And she is very similar to Daniel Tiger in the Mr. Rogers series, where she is the inner child. She is the deep emotional world of Suzie Hicks, the Climate Chick, which is the role that I play, who is like the trusted adult. But specifically, she represents climate anxiety and what kids are experiencing every day as they see the effects of climate change happening in the real world, and then also hear about what's happening through the news and whispers at the dinner table and misinformation on social media. And so we wanted to create kind of a like welcoming committee for climate science in the ways that Barney and Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers did for real life things that kids were seeing. Because it's not all, even if you're a kid, life is not all rainbows and sunshine. Like, yeah, hard things happen. And when these hard things happen, like COVID, people and organizations like PBS are there to say, here's what's happening. Here's how you can talk about it. Here's what you can do. And I also work at the local PBS station in LA. And my full-time job during the pandemic was helping teachers learn how to remote learn, because PBS has been essentially remote learning since the 70s, because it's TV. And so basically we turned into school because we had educational content that had curriculum you could use at home asynchronously. And so through the show, I wanted to kind of be the welcoming committee for climate change, because up until this point and still now, there's no basis for climate literacy in schools. And so people come to climate awareness at way different points in their lives. Some people learn about it when they're kids. I teach a climate justice course right now, so all my 8-year-olds know about it and they know about the solutions. But some people don't learn about climate change until they're well into their 40s. And then the first feeling they have about it is shame, fear, and guilt. And so our goal with the show is to say, okay, we are going to talk about something that really is not very positive, but we're going to allow you the space to navigate your feelings about it. We're going to introduce you to a role model that is doing really awesome work, so you can see that model behavior and show that you can do it too. And then we're going to focus on the solutions, because there's enough content out there telling us how bad everything is. I don't need to tell you. You know how bad it is. What I'm here to tell you is what's being done about it already and how you can plug in.
Let's talk about, though, the because that part I don't totally agree with.
Heard.
Because people are staying away. People are turning off the news left and right. I grew up that way, and so I'm always looking. Nothing scares me. I want to know it, and I try to find different perspectives. And I'm a big believer in doing research, right? I'm not going to just take because I saw it on there. I'm going to actually see if that's true or not. But a lot of people, they turn off the news. They stay away from it. They stay away from those parts. I know how many people, and you do too, that get off of social media.
Totally.
And they just kind of go into their own life. And I don't blame them. I understand that, right? We still got to do all the other aspects of our life. We have to make money, the economy, kids, all those aspects of it. So that's the tough part. And then I know you're fighting with social media because there's so many people that put misinformation out there, right? And I always tell people, check your sources. Okay. The internet's great. Social media is great, but you got to look on both sides. So talk about those challenges that you have to go to with I don't really want to call it sticking their head in the sand, but there is a lot of that.
Right.
Just
And
can't deal with the news and they jump off of it.
oh gosh, absolutely. And that comes a lot from A, the political polarization of climate
Sure.
change, which I wrote my first thesis on, and then B, ecophobia, which is what I wrote my second thesis on. And I really appreciate your perspective about that because it it is hard to look at, but it's necessary to look at.
Sure.
And the first thing I'll say about that is that it's not just on the news anymore.
Right.
It's happening everywhere in
Sure.
real life. The impacts of climate change are unavoidable. Like
Sure.
you can't stick your head in the sand if the sand is underwater or it's on fire.
Sure.
And so millions of kids all over the world are already experiencing the impacts of climate change. And that kind of trauma often leads to kind of the radicalization of being like, what are we doing?
Sure.
Um, and then the second thing is that it is absolutely necessary to give that literacy of the impacts. And so for me, my pedagogical approach is talking about four things: talking about the causes, the impacts, the solutions, and the role models. And so it is necessary to talk about the impacts. And I do in the show to give that kind of necessary informational context of saying climate change is happening. Some places are experiencing more storms. Some places are experiencing droughts and wildfires, and cold places are not getting so cold anymore. Even the oceans are changing.
Sure.
But in my perspective as a climate communicator, out of the four things that we could be talking about, the only thing we talk about is the impacts. The only thing that we know is that horrible things are happening. We don't always get the information of why there was a massive flood in Houston, why there were these absolutely horrible wildfires in California. We just get this is happening and it's bad. And so for me, it's kind of widening the lens so that we're able to tell the whole story, of saying this is happening because of fossil fuel infrastructure and biodiversity loss. It's happening right now. That absolutely we need to know. Here's what we know we can do about it. And people can often get into the like, well, humanity's just bad, period. And when I teach my courses to little kids about climate change, I always start the course by saying, do you think humans are bad for the environment? And some kids will go, yeah, have you seen what's happening? But most of my students go, no, we're just making some bad choices right now. And they have that context already.
Sure.
And so I usually start all my classes by talking about indigenous cultures and how human beings, fully evolved in our final form in the way that we are now, have lived on Earth for tens to hundreds of thousands of years sustainably. And
Right.
so human beings know how to live in relation with the Earth. The concept of plastic pollution and climate change and fossil fuels is only a couple of 100 years old, and plastics are basically less than 100 years old.
Right.
And so the way that I'm able to frame it is that we have this really big problem that is happening right now. And here's how it's affecting us.
Right.
And human beings are inherently problem solvers. And so we can put our brains together to find the solutions that we need rather than sitting on our thumbs going, well, we're all doomed.
Yeah, and I agree with it all. But you know, it's interesting. So I live here in Texas.
Yeah.
And we've had all kinds of, we had the heat last summer was unbelievable.
Yeah.
We've had more rain this year than we had 6 months last year.
Right.
And so these things that you talk about. And so it's obviously a conversation. You talk to people all the time, weather. I've never had anyone say climate change. They'll say Texas, what's Texas? The weather changes in Texas. And
Right.
this is not what I'm talking about. I think the kids understand it more than the adults. And I think it's because the adults don't want to talk about it. And so when you talk about it, no one ever says what's going on in the world, climate change. Well, it's just the weather, Texas, and you'll hear that about other states too. It's not just Texas, right? Well,
Oh yeah.
weather changes in California, but no one says climate change. The younger people might, right? They're more open to it. They're more open to it. So how do you get to those adults?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Part of the reason why my target audience is kids is that it's really easy to establish these priorities young rather than have to unlearn them.
Sure.
When you've spent your entire life in one reality, changing that is really hard.
Well,
But
and
to
that's why they were so open to a big purple dinosaur being their friend and love and that concept.
Yep.
It's the same exact thing. It took their parents forever to come
Yeah.
along with it. For the kids, it was really it made sense.
Yeah.
Made
And
sense. So I'm sorry not to interrupt you, but I'm
no,
with you 1,000%.
you make an incredible point of saying like A, kids are deeply open-minded, and B, they're incredible arbiters of justice. Like kids know right and wrong, minus all the bureaucracy and minus the, well, that's not how the economy works. They're like, wait, no, this is bad. We shouldn't be doing this. And they
Well, they
also
can tell
know,
if you're authentic, right? They can
right,
tell if you're trying to tell them something wrong or hurt or do anything. And that if you're just showing something out of your heart and being open about it and not preaching, it's easy for them to jump in.
of course. And then it's of course I love this big purple dinosaur. He's kind to me and he teaches me how to be a person. And obviously parents are going to be like, that's weird. But then the same thing happens, which is love.
Right.
The love that the parents have for their kids can trump whatever ideas they have about normalcy. And
It
so,
it was the most incredible thing. I would perform in his heyday in front of 16,000 people.
mhm,
And at the end of the show, when we were doing I Love You, and the kids would hug their parents, the parents got it.
yeah,
Right. When
get it.
all of a sudden the kids look over, hug and kiss their parents, and the parents are like, and this is why this is such an important show. So
Yeah.
sorry not to jump you off, but I'm vibing with you so big on this because
Yeah.
I love this. I
It's
love
so
this.
powerful. It's so powerful. And it's a term called kidfluence, where kids are, and it's not immediate. It's not like, oh, I immediately am on board with this.
Sure.
It takes a little bit of time, but parents really want to do what their kids want and need to have a successful
Sure.
future. They set up education funds, they set up savings accounts, they do all these things, they give them healthy food, and it's very much about, the kids are getting this future that is so polluted and so unstable that when I talk to parents and when I talk to people that are doing this work, so many of them are like, I didn't get into climate change until I had a kid. And suddenly it wasn't just about me anymore.
Right.
And so children, through this kind of intergenerational communication, are such powerful messengers of being like, don't you love me? Don't you want me to grow up in a world? And something that I really think about, I probably saw this on the internet like years and years ago, is like, there's a cartoon of a kid talking to his parents of being like, well, what did you do to protect me? And and the parent is like, well, I made a lot of sales for Amazon. And it's like, I want to live with the integrity of knowing that I did every single thing possible so that a future child of mine or the kids that I teach have a shot at a really healthy life.
Sure.
And that clues into the Fred Rogers quote of like, it's I'm gonna butcher it, but it's like something about, it doesn't matter how many accolades you have, it doesn't matter how much money you make. What matters is that when you think about yourself and you think about the work that you do, you feel good and you feel like it's true and you don't have to hide behind anything. And so yeah, it feels really important that I come through the kids, because not only are they going to talk to their parents, but also their parents are going to be watching with them. And so that co-viewing allows them to learn the same lessons that their kids are learning.
Right.
And it's not, how dare you drive a car? It's like,
Right.
let's learn how to build more walkable cities together, you
Right.
know? And yeah, it's all rooted in love, which
Right.
I feel really strongly about Barney too.
Well, it was incredible. And everyone that was part of that was on that mission too, which was what made it so special.
Hmm.
It just didn't matter from our cast kids to our directors to the art department. It didn't matter. They all saw what it was doing. We were fortunate. We did a lot of make-a-wishes. We did a lot of
Awesome.
aspects. And if you weren't a believer before those, you became one after that. I want to talk about, because you're doing a show like you're doing, there is an aspect that you've got to have to make that survive, which is you got to have fun too, right? It
Oh
just
my
can't
God, yeah.
be, or it doesn't work, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
work. And there was aspects of our show that we, like Barney jumping into a swimming pool, that was just about having fun,
that's
right?
so awesome.
There are messages. We had messages in every episode, and we're teaching love and we're teaching all that, but you got to have fun. So
Mhm.
talk about that part of it,
Our
having
show is, yeah,
fun,
it's so fun. And like that's the purpose of kids media, is that it's like the fun uncle to education.
right?
Like that's what I love about it, because I'm terrible at classroom management. I'm a teacher right now and I have such a hard time being like, sit down, because I'm like, we're just having fun and this is great.
Sure.
And so in the show, the the puppet is hilarious and she's so funny and silly that we've had to like reshoot a couple of times, because the puppeteer that we have is so good that he'll like do something and everyone behind camera just like cracks up, and I lose my mind and start laughing. And in the show, it's all about the relationship between me and the puppet, and it's not like we're here to talk about climate change. She's like, oh, I'm a little worried about this. Like, can you tell me what's going on? And then I do. And then she has whatever emotional reaction she has. For the first episode, it's like general overwhelm. For the second episode, it's anger. And when we sit with the emotions and we say, how can we regulate in this moment? And then how can we make a difference overall? So then we get to go on these like big, beautiful adventures where in the first episode, we go to LA because that's where we are.
Sure.
And we learn about solar energy. And we're like, what? This is crazy. And then at the end of the show, we invite real kids in, and there are climate buddies. And we do something called Review-a-Palooza, where we all we like answer some of the questions from the day, but then we have this big dance party where we're like, yeah, we're learning these concepts. And every single episode has 2 original songs. And so the way that episode 1 ends, here's a little sneak peek because we
Love
haven't
it. Love
debuted
it.
it, is that it's a song about renewable energy. And the chorus goes, if we use water, wind, earth, and sunlight, we will be all right. Our future is bright. And so it's just this like big, wonderful, jammy dance party, which stems directly from social movements, different social movements, because when social movements have this musical aspect to them, especially movements that are like, we're gonna win, it gets people excited. It gets like, down by the riverside, ain't gonna study war no more. Or there's a song called all you fascists bound to lose. And then there are these like very fun, upbeat movement songs that keep people inspired and keep them going. And so, it's the show is just this big musical adventure where we learn how to feel our feelings, but then also like have really dumb jokes about plants at the same time.
Which you have to do, that's the whole point, right? To
Yeah.
have that fun part of it and to see where that all goes. So the
Mm.
puppet, whose idea, where did it go?
The puppet came from when we were creating the concept for the kids show in general. I had a group of 4 of my closest friends, or 5 of us all together. And once every 2 weeks, we would get on Zoom for 2 hours and talk about the show. And I would give them $20 Grubhub gift cards because I was like, I don't have a lot of money, but I want you to eat. So every time we have a meeting, you can get food. And we were talking about switching the concept of the show, because we had done the show already for a college age audience. So we
Okay.
had done like how to throw a party without using single-use plastics, and like how to talk to your uncle at the dinner table who doesn't believe in climate change. And we were like, how do we swap this with like the same silly, like fun adventure type, but how do we make this for kids? And I was really impacted by Sesame Street, and I was working at PBS Kids at the time, and I was really impacted by Jim Henson and just like the silliness and like the goofiness of the puppeteering that they did, where these puppets absolutely come alive and have horrible attitudes sometimes and are like aggressive, and it's hilarious that they're so filled with this humanity. And we had talked about having some kind of puppet, and we didn't know what that looked like, but through these conversations on Zoom deep in the pandemic, we were like, I think she needs to be a plant. And then we were like nameless plant puppet for a while, and then Sprout just came to us, and she's the real star of the show. Like, I'm just there to help because I have a degree in climate science now. Like, I'm just there to like give the information and give the social emotional regulation, but like it's really her character arc that happens in each of the episodes. And so she's the star of the show.
I love it. Let's talk about Portland.
Oh yeah,
let's talk about, tell everyone what happened.
So so funny actually. I was in like a long dark night of the soul about the show, because it's the proof of concept was really low budget. And I had a couple of conversations about pitching it to a network, and they seemed really interested, and then they ghosted me. And I was like, this is the worst. And I was like, okay, you're feeling really bad about this. Why don't you just submit it as is to a couple of film festivals? And your only goal is that the show gets in to one festival. And the first festival that we submitted to was the Portland Eco Film Festival. And we got in, and then the head of the festival was like, can we hop on a Zoom call? And I was like, so sad at that point. I was like, the show isn't going anywhere. Nobody wants it. And we got on this Zoom call, and he was like, a couple of things. First of all, we are giving you the Visionary Film Award because the heart of this show is so meaningful and so important, and we've never seen anyone do it like this, that we know it's low budget and it doesn't like hold a candle to the global documentaries that we're showing at this film festival. But we see you, and we see that the work you're doing is important, and we see that you're going places. And so we'd like to give you this award. Also, do you want to fly out to Portland, and do you want to lecture at the college we partner with, and do you want to come do a screening of the show? And suddenly this project that I had like all but given up on had a completely new life. And I went out to Portland and I lectured at a local college about community-based organizing and environmental media. We had a screening. I got on NPR, like somehow I got like a 14-minute long interview on the local NPR station where I talked basically about my like work as an environmental communicator. And then they put my freaking name on the marquee of the theater. And I was like, this is crazy. And then, we ended up being in 11 more film festivals after that. And going to Portland was such a solidifying moment of being like, I got to keep doing this. I have to keep going. And it was unbelievably important for me.
Well, I love it. I talk about this all the time. I have seen so many unbelievable ideas fall by the wayside because you just have to do it. You know, a theme throughout this whole show, and we've had so many amazing guests on here, and the word no, if you haven't figured out how to deal with that, you're just not going to be successful. You know, what you're saying is something that everyone's gone through it, but the fact that you kept going and you kept pushing, and you go, okay, well then I got to go this route. And I love that you just set up a simple goal. Just get in a film festival. And that's where the good stuff happens.
Yeah. And it's so much just like tiny little micro steps that
Sure.
keep you moving forward. And man, it felt good to get a win because I'm still getting no's. I get no's all the time. I think I just
Sure.
got a rejection email this morning, but
Sure.
I'm also getting a couple more yeses than I was last year. And
That's
I
it.
have a couple more contacts than I had last year, and I have a couple more leads than I had last year. And that's enough. That's enough to say this is worth pursuing.
Well, I mean, Barney created such an unbelievable uh audience its first season, and it was canceled.
Yeah, it's
It was canceled.
unbelievable.
And the parents had to call and say, "What are you doing?" and bring the thing back. So, I mean, it's, Sesame Street can tell the stories, and they can all tell the stories through it, but you just keep going. And I just absolutely love that. So you have completed your first, the pilot's done.
Yes.
When are we going to see it?
Oh goodness. Hopefully it'll be out by the end of the summer.
Okay.
We're shooting for August so that teachers still have a little bit of time to put it into their curriculum while they're planning. And we are also creating a whole host of curriculum that goes along with it. So not only are you going to just show it in your classrooms or wherever, you can teach it too. You can create lesson plans around it. I'm so excited. I know I made it, but I feel like it's so good. And it's been weird because the proof of concept is on a password protected Vimeo link. And so like only a couple of hundred people have seen it who have like I've strategically sent it out to and people at festivals. But this feels like the first real debut of being like, this is the work that I do. I make kids media for climate and here it is. And so I'm really excited. And obviously I'll probably panic about it when we actually release it, but man, I'm excited. And just talking to you about of your own journey of a show that really impacted me when I was a kid, but also learning that you had to go through this similar path of rejection, but also like the grind of being like, I'm gonna go out of a van to birthday parties because I believe in this is just like it makes me feel so connected to you, but be like so grateful that you were able to have this journey that it's possible.
Well, it's definitely possible. And what makes me so happy is seeing you go do that. See you doing that. I got inspired from watching, like I said, Mr. Rogers and all of that.
Yeah.
And I got to meet them.
Oh,
And
so cool.
yeah, and I got to work with Carol Spinney, which,
Oh my God.
to work with Big Bird, and he treated me like his equal. And I felt like I was a little kid. I mean, it was unbelievable. We were working together, and I, pinch me. It was such an amazing, and I think that's such an important. But we have to have people that keep this going, and you're doing that, and that inspires me. And just listening to you and your energy, I'm like, oh, she's gonna be fine.
Oh, thanks. That's nice to hear. Oh my God.
You're gonna be fine. So how many episodes are we gonna get?
So we are getting one episode, but the thing is,
Okay.
we are breaking each episode up into 4 segments.
Okay.
So we are getting 4 5-minute mini episodes in one episode about a topic so that we can release it on YouTube so you can learn about the concept, the social emotional impact, the role model, and then you get to have a party at the end and sing the song and do the review. But then it's packageable to be an 11-minute episode if, one day Netflix is like, we want it, or,
right.
Some streamer is like, we'll take it. We can package it up into an 11-minute episode, but we shot 20 minutes worth so that it can be these 5-minute mini episodes. So technically 1, technically 4.
And then one will be either a second or number 5. When do you?
Yeah.
What do you keep doing?
That's super
you're gonna
fair.
shop it out there, or what's the plan?
The plan is that we are going to use this pilot to fund the rest of the season, because we were able to raise $50,000 just through a crowdfunding campaign, which took years off my life.
Sure, of course it did.
And so we were able to raise the $50K for the first episode, and we used that to make it look so good, so crisp and delicious. And we're using that to shop it out to funders to say, look what we were able to do with the money that we scrounged from
Sure.
hundreds of normal people who believe in us. If you gave us another 50,000 or another 100,000 or, $15 million, look what we would be able to do. So if you know anyone that is just sitting on millions of dollars and cares about climate change, send them my way.
I
But
will do that.
yeah, we're using this as kind of our debut to say, this is the kind of content we make. Do you want to help us?
Well, it's just funny when it go. I had an actor who was on Barney, but he is now doing independent filming, and
Awesome.
they put their first. He was on, and he was talking about he put his first movie out there, film festival,
Yeah.
and after that, someone came up and said, "I love what you're doing. I want to give you money." And
Oh,
so
that's a
that's
beautiful
so
thing to
that's
hear.
how it happened. I mean, that's how it happened, and it
Yeah,
was double what he had on his first one. The guy offered up double the budget on his first one.
that's
So
awesome.
you can't get that if you don't put something out there.
Yeah, you just have to make the thing. And that's been the hardest thing for me to remember, of being like, you don't have to wait for anyone's permission. You
No,
just have to make the thing low budget, and then you make it a little less low budget, and then you make it
right.
a little less low budget next time. So
That's
that's
right.
the path we're on.
That's exactly it. Well, it has just been a pleasure having you on, and you've got me fired up.
Woo! Carey, thank you so much.
I absolutely love it. So it'll be on YouTube.
Mhm.
Okay. And then they can go to your social media as well, like Instagram,
Oh
and you'll
yeah,
putting out there and promoting it out there.
totally. Yeah, my Instagram is Suzie Hicks Climate Chick, and then my TikTok is the Climate Chick.
Well, and we will be putting that on all our social media and all that stuff
Awesome.
too. Don't worry, we're going to promote you like crazy. And I'm pretty
Woo!
sure, Susie, I'm going to be going, we need to have you back on again.
I would love that. That would be amazing. I love talking to you, Carey, and I'm grateful to, have a kind of mentor in this space. It's just, you're amazing.
Well, thank you. Anything you need from me, you let me know. But
Thanks.
this just been a pleasure, and I can't wait to see when this show comes out, where it goes.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for watching Purple Roads. Remember to keep your ears, your eyes, and your heart open and listen to Susie. And we'll see you real soon.